What's up, Weirdo Swarm, and welcome back to another episode of Podagon Infinity, the podcast that opens the door to all things King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. My name is Joe, and I am a salute for the flute.
My name is Spencer, and I, too, am a salute for the flute. And Joey referenced it at the end of last week's episode. We'll reiterate it right up off the top here. There is no shortage of flute in the topic of this week's episode. This week we are talking about 2015's Paper Mache Dream Balloon. Yeah, no shortage of flute on this thing.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about Paper Mache Dream Balloon. This was another early Giz album that I got into that was recommended to me very early in my getting introduced to the band. And so I've spent a lot of time with it, very familiar with it, and it never gets old, never fails to make me feel good, especially on a nice day or a day where, a chaotic day where I need to chill out a little bit. This is one I always go back to, and it comforts me in a special way. So yeah, I'm very happy to be talking about this one today, and I think it'll be cool to jump back in time a little bit to an older album of theirs.
For sure, and it serves similar purposes to me, too. It's very comforting to me, and we'll get into the track listing in just a little bit. First, we just want to say, although there are no new listener messages this week, we do appreciate those who have sent in messages to this point. So again, another call to action to all of you listening out there. Feel free to send us a DM or an email at Podagon Infinity on all the socials, podagoninfinity@gmail.com if you prefer to reach out to us via email. We've got some great listener messages from you all, and we can't wait to hear what else everybody has to say out there. We love the feedback on the show. We love all the cool stories and memories and stuff, so please do keep them coming. In the place of where we would usually read the listener messages this week, in the absence of any new ones this week, we want to welcome all the new followers and listeners to the show. We have seen our following begin to grow on social media, especially on Instagram, and we want to thank those who have been spreading the word about the show. I know Joe did a lot of footwork with that in going to the Detroit meetup the day before the acoustic show last month. So again, big thanks to you there, Joe. And we really do appreciate those of you who have spread the word and who have been giving us all the positive thoughts and reactions on the show. We love you all very much.
Absolutely. We are super appreciative of anyone who's shared the show or even just listened to it at all. We just do this for the love of the game, love of the band, and we've been having a lot of fun with it so far, and we're hoping to continue doing it for a long, long time. So you spreading the word around and helping us get out there is a great help for us to be able to continue doing that. And also thanks again to all the people that helped make last week's episode possible. If you haven't heard it, last week we covered our live concert Giz experience, and I was able to interview some people on the street outside of the Detroit acoustic show and put together a little segment of my chats with Giz heads from all over the country, and it was just so much fun. So please go back and check that episode out if you haven't heard that one yet.
So let's jump into the album and give a little bit of background information on it first. Paper Mache Dream Balloon was King Giz's 7th studio album, released November 13th, 2015, and it was one of their earlier departures in the catalog, if I may be so bold. Probably not their first departure. I think those honors might go to Eyes Like the Sky, in terms of being a little bit out of left field for what you might consider the band's signature sound, at least at the time. But Joe, this one is a little bit of an oddball, especially in the earlier part of the King Giz catalog, and there is all sorts of interesting background information that we were able to unearth about it.
And one of those things we were able to unearth about the history of the making of this album is we have a quote from Stu on the album's Bandcamp page that I'm going to read here. Stu says, "After Mindfuzz and Quarters, I was starting to get over concept records. I wanted to make an album with a collection of short, unrelated songs. I wanted to steer away from electric guitar music, which I felt like we'd explored pretty heavily on the last couple. So, Paper Mache Dream Balloon, the conceptless concept album, got a concept. No electric instruments, just acoustic guitars, flute, double bass, fiddle, harmonica, drum kit, clarinet, whatever we could find, really. We recorded it mostly in an empty shipping container on my parents' farm in country Victoria. It was all horses, emus, and Tim Tams." And I know what horses and emus are, but I had to Google Tim Tams as an American. It is an Australian chocolate-covered biscuit treat of some sort.
Wish I had some Tim Tams next to me right now as we record.
Yeah, sounds pretty good.
I would eat them off mic, of course, but they do sound pretty tasty. Yeah.
I also happen to own this album on vinyl. I was lucky enough, sometime early last year, I think, I was at my favorite local record store. Shout out Siren Records in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And they have a used bin where, people trade in records, I guess, all the time. And so I always dig through there because sometimes you could find some gold on the cheap. And I happened to find a copy of Paper Mache on vinyl at that store in this used bin. And so I have the record right in front of me here, and there's some interesting stuff that kind of goes along with this quote from Stu that's on the back of the inner sleeve of the record. It's got all the song lyrics and all this kind of stuff and some cool artwork on it. So there's a little thank you to some people from Stu on the back of it that I'm going to read real quick here. It says, "Thanks to Mum, Dad, Grandy, and Gramps for having us in the shipping container." That's so funny. "Thanks to Liza and Neve for having us at your house. Thanks to Jared and Richie for the bass. Thanks to Mladen and the girl across the street for the piano. Thanks to Mark and the Foreign National for your studio. Thanks and sorry to Andrea for being a loud and annoying housemate. Thanks to Alex for the continual lend of the guitar. And thanks, Philippa, for, well, everything. Love, Stu." I don't really know who any of these people are, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing a lot of their names correctly or not, but I thought that was interesting. I never knew about the whole shipping container thing and where they recorded this album until we got that quote there, and then I just happened to read this off of my record, and there's some connections there. So shout out to Stu's family for the shipping container, I guess. The album wouldn't have been what it was without that.
These special boys, as we've been referring to them throughout the history of this young show, these special boys are insane improvisational guys, whether it be on stage at a live show or in terms of the recording process. We've talked about the making of Fishing for Fishies and that ramshackle house in the countryside, and now all of a sudden a shipping container. Just they play wherever the hell they want. They record wherever the hell they want, man.
It amazes me after learning this and then listening back to this album, like, how does it sound so good? This was recorded in a goddamn shipping container and God knows where else, anywhere but an actual music studio. Well, I'm jealous of their ability to create perfection in the weirdest environments.
So adding on some more background to the album itself as a whole, there is also a special bundle that at some point in I think more recent years became available. The bundle includes the original release of this album plus an instrumental version of the album. No vocals, just chill stuff. And so those two vinyls are packaged together. And then there's this outer sleeve packaging on the bundle that's translucent, with the exception of a little yellow vertical stripe on the left side. And it has all of these cool, I'm going to call it complimentary little statements, couplets, something of that nature. It says, "Beautiful and terrifying, the thorniest rose, calm and calculated, the evaporating rainbow, the smell of tin sheds and horse shit, Tim Tams and dahlias, mice and magpies, a cool tune in the hot breeze, a throwaway classic, Gizzard's Utopia." End quote. So that's on the outer sleeve packaging of the bundle with, as I mentioned, the original album package with the instrumental version. And I think that's a really good, not only segue into getting into the track by track here in a moment, but also what this album is about. It's about a lot of contradictions, I guess is a good way to put it. This album, you'll find, has a lot of very happy, chill, relaxing sounds, but dig a little bit into the lyrics, and there is some dark stuff going on.
Yeah, this album really is, we've mentioned before that they like to do this with a lot of their music, where it's kind of a juxtaposition of happy, groovy, upbeat music with just dark lyrics. There was a little bit of that on Fishing for Fishies with all those environmental themes and everything, and but along with this upbeat jam. But this album is that to the next level. I mean, all these songs are like super chill and pretty, but most of them really do feel like they have a kind of a darker lyrical meaning behind them all. So with all of that said, Spencer, why don't we go ahead and start jumping into these songs?
Let's do it. Yeah, this album starts off with the beautiful, gentle Sense.
I need more Giz clarinet. I know I said I'm a salute for the flute, and I've talked ad nauseum about how much I love the harmonica, but I think I need more clarinet after jumping back into this album and getting ready to talk about it. I love it. That's like the main kind of melody that you first hear after the guitar when the drums kick in and everything, that clarinet carrying on that. Oh, it's just it's so cool and so unique. And right off the bat, we are just gently, softly greeted with just the most chill, jazzy, easy listening Giz that we've heard yet.
Yeah, and I equate this song with the beginning of a nice long drive home after a long workday. As I hinted at earlier in this episode, this is a go-to at the end of a long workday, just as kind of a relaxation helper, companion in the car. And I associate this song and this intro to the song in particular with a very specific stretch of road driving away from the workplace and making a left turn heading toward my route home. So this is just the epitome of comfort to my ears. But of course, given what we hinted at the top of this episode, beneath the relaxing instrumentation are some lyrics that sometimes can be frightening, sometimes evoke thought exercises, and this one I think is more so the latter. This makes you think just about the way that people live their lives in sometimes selfish, sometimes flippant ways, and I think to that, with that in mind, Stu breaks out instantly a couple of words that either of us or maybe both of us had to look up in the dictionary, both of those coming within the first 40 seconds of the song. Stu hits us with the word feckless and the word ashen. And like, okay, we're getting right into it here, Stu. Feckless, we looked this up a long time ago, lacking initiative or strength of character, irresponsible, and I use the word flippant. It's just reckless, like lacking any sort of desire to do the right thing. And then ashen, pale with shock, fear, or illness. He's horrified by the decisions and the way that people sometimes go about their lives and not caring, as the song indicates, the mother taking care of us. I think that's hinting at Mother Earth or nature. And so you see very early on, from the first needle drop on this album, these lyrics make you think, and the instrumentation does not indicate that this is going to be a heavy matter sort of album, but just shows how closely you have to listen to these guys.
I like that you mentioned the mother taking care of us lyric, because my brain with this band, and I feel like this is pretty easy to do, especially, thinking back to our Fishing for Fishies discussion, I think it's really easy to guess that maybe this song is kind of pointing at environmentalism as well, and climate change and the carelessness of people not taking care of the earth, the mother taking care of us, So I think that's very possible, but it could also just be more general than that, him just being disgusted and horrified at people just not caring in general, not caring about their environment, but also not caring about others around them and, the general well-being of anything. So it could just be more general, but I couldn't help but point out that the possible environmental nod in this one as well.
Going back one quick second to the lighter side of this song, as far as the gentle instrumentation, this song belongs in one of those little hole-in-the-wall indie coffee shops to me. It's something about the fingers squeaking across the acoustic guitar strings. That's something that I have latched onto so hard in these past couple of years when, as this elder millennial that I am, I just want to unplug and chill sometimes. I want to sit at a coffee house and hear just a whole playlist at the place full of those acoustic guitar-laden tracks with those fingers squeaking across the strings. It's just such a feel, such a vibe for me. And between that and the whine of the strings, I believe it's the violin that Stu plays in this case, around the 34-second mark of this track, after he sings "I Know It's So Conventional," you get that kind of high whine of the strings, that
like screech. Yeah.
There are just such nice little subtle touches with various instruments throughout this album, and you get the clarinet trills throughout, kind of gently warbling several times throughout this track alone, and it's a good indicator of the sort of care and attention to detail that the band has put into these tracks.
I could not agree more about the coffee shop thing. I think Starbucks needs to get this on their playlist ASAP. I have definitely had the same thought as you before on that. All right, with all that said about Sense, why don't we go ahead and jump into track 2, Bone.
Bone, track number 2 on the album. So after the very relaxing opener, probably one of the slowest pace opening tracks, but still one of the most effective tracks, I think, in the King Giz catalog. We get a little more upbeat on track 2, as almost as if to say, I'm thinking from the viewpoint of a listener from when this album was first released. It's almost like the band is saying, okay, don't worry, we'll get something a little upbeat in here for you. So this song is faster paced, but again, introspective in nature, causes you to think. And this is a little bit different subject matter. This is more personal, just from a more personalized standpoint of the songwriter, the lyric writer, rather than lyrics being geared toward being flippant towards those around us, towards the environment around us. This one is much more personalized as far as my physical being really doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. And, we're not going to delve too deep into the weeds here as far as Stu or the band's religious beliefs, whatever. I think it is very, very clearly noted in various outlets that Stu is not a religious person. But there's still thoughts that he has on such matters, and he says very clearly through the lyrics, they're basically realizing that our physical bodies, and by extension maybe our material possessions as well, are of little import in the end when all is said and done with each of our individual lives. Because he's talking about bones and flesh and basically all that's physical about me. This is all going to be torn up to shreds. This is all going to decay. It's all going to, fall by the wayside. Hands and toes, feet and head, carry on to be fed. I didn't realize at first, by the way, that it was carry on in terms of just sort of like rotting flesh. I thought it was the words carry on.
Yeah, I always thought the same thing. I was actually going to point that out, that we're immediately getting another English lesson in track 2 right off the bat with the word carry in or carry on, however it's supposed to be pronounced. I had to look that one up the other day while making my notes, and Google says the decaying flesh of dead animals. So another lovely picture right off in this nice acoustic track here.
Stu also sings, any dog can chew over my bone and all my wine's going to turn into blood. So yeah, that's just hammering home the point further that my bones, my flesh, all of my organs, those really aren't going to mean much in the end. It's what's inside of my head. When I'm gone and I'm dead, what will be inside my head? So he's being mindful of what are the thoughts and the convictions that I have inside my brain? What is inside of me? That's what's ultimately going to be the difference maker in the end.
Yeah, that what will be inside my head line might almost even be more of like a rhetorical question where it's like, when I'm gone and I'm dead, what will be inside my head? Well, nothing, because I'll be gone. That's the end of it. So it's like
also accurate.
Yeah, so maybe it's about kind of like letting go and not worrying so much about things that about physical things or just life worries in general, because in the end you're just going to be a pile of bones and dead, and nothing will matter anymore. So kind of a nice message, but at the same time super dark.
We're getting dark early on with our analysis, although we haven't yet reached the tip of the iceberg in terms of lyrical darkness on the album.
Also, every time you say the word tip of the iceberg, I think of Antarctica now. I can't let go of that.
Of course. Antarctica, that's the place for me.
Yeah, but that's a different album anyway.
Stu hits the refrain a couple of times in this song, if heaven is a place I know, I won't be taking my bones. Of course, in a physical sense, for most of us, our bones go into the ground. If we're buried after we die or we're cremated after we die, in many cases, so our bones basically go into the ground, or you might call it into the dirt.
Handshakes and bitter rounds are the common conjecture. I can dissect anything and save the skin for later.
Slowing things down again a little bit on track 3 here. It's a little bit slower like Sense was. We got the energy of Bone, and now we're kind of chilling back out again with this one. And I love the contrast and the way this album kind of goes up and down with the tempos of the different songs. They might all have a similar vibe in terms of the instrumentation and acoustic nature of them, but the energy does kind of go up and down and roller coaster a little bit, and I love that. You never get bored.
Yeah, you never get bored. It keeps you on your toes as a listener, and you don't get the sense that you don't get the sense that the tracks are too samey, that they're too similar. Instead, you get a nice, what feels like a variety and change from one track to the next. So it's really good sequencing on this album, I think. I'll be transparent in saying I'm not fully sure about what the lyrics in the song are trying to communicate, But, phrases like handshakes and bitter rows referring to fights or quarrels, handshakes and bitter rows are the common conjecture. I can dissect anything and save the skin for later. I know it's just a time and things will get better, but I don't mind much anyway. Vampire reflection. It's just sort of a weird, but at the same time poetic writing and singing of these lyrics. I can't really make heads or tails of this personally, Joe, even though I do enjoy the song as a whole. What are your thoughts on this one?
So in my notes for this song, I wrote, like the magpie's morning monologue. I don't know what this one's about, TBH. So that's what I wrote. But, looking at the lyrics now and trying to pull some meaning from, like you said, the kind of poetic nature of the lyrics of this one, they're not very straightforward, and that's what's kind of beautiful about it. One part that stands out to me here is these lines, gestured in our selfish understanding, tensions only surface when you're hurt. I think that could maybe be kind of meaning that like people only cause problems and are mean or bitter or angry when they are hurt themselves. Like hurt people hurt others or whatever that, quote is that people throw around. I think maybe it's kind of getting at something like that. At least those couple lines are giving me that. And I don't know. You got any thoughts on that, Spencer? Am I going anywhere with this?
I don't know, but to be fair, again, I don't know where else I can go with the lyrical content of this song. I do, however, appreciate in a strange way, I don't know if this is a detail that anyone else has ever taken much stock in, but the first 3 tracks on this album are single word titles. Sense, Bone, Dirt. And I like that because... and it's not something I expect out of every album that I listen to, but I like it in the sense that you don't really know what this song is going to be about until you hear it for the first time. Pearl Jam's 10 is another album that's notorious for a lot of single-word track titles, and it's so different. It's such a different look from when you're diving into the album for the first time, and for example, you see a song with a title like, and I'm going super broad and popular here, I Believe in a Thing Called Love. You have a pretty good idea of what that song is going to be about. but more of a single, vague, like, sense, bone, dirt, like, it kind of intrigues you. It's like, what's this one all about? And in some cases, at least the way we feel about this one, Dirt, sometimes you don't really figure it out, no matter how many times you listen to it.
One other thing I'll mention about this song, of course, we started off this episode talking about the flute being super dominant throughout this entire record, and both Bone and Dirt, right here in the beginning, that Sense had that clarinet kind of carrying more of the main melody, but Bone and Dirt back to back have really awesome, beautiful flute melodies that just kind of carry the whole track all the way through. So that's going to be my first of several shout outs to the flute. Hey everybody, I'm just going to jump in here real quick while I'm editing the episode to say that I just watched a clip of the boys playing Dirt live just literally today in Red Rocks, and before they played, Joey said that the song is about dirt, specifically high quality soil, but nonetheless, it's about dirt, so you could just go ahead and ignore everything we just said. Anyway, back to the episode.
And that flute, for which we are sleuths, very much continues on the next track, the title track, Paper Mache Dream Balloon.
When I get trouble my way, like paper mache, they stick to camera.
Yeah, maybe my favorite main flute melody throughout the whole album. This one is one that becomes a serious earworm in my head every time I listen to this album.
Sweet and comforting are 2 of the main words that come to mind when I listen to this song. I also really like the touch of Cavs playing, I believe it's the bongos at the very beginning. You just hear that gentle dum-dum-dum, and you hear that recurring throughout several tracks on the album. The guys kind of noodling around in the studio at the tail end or at the very beginning of these track transitions. And I think that's another small detail that lends itself to, hey, this is a real like home-cooked kind of like almost an informal feel to it. It's just guys playing these basic acoustic instruments.
Guys being dudes.
Yeah, instruments that have been around for much, much longer than a lot of the electric instruments that they play, obviously, on the vast majority of the catalog.
This song is also kind of on the slow side, but is one of the more pretty and gentle of the entire album. In fact, I wrote down here that this is the happiest sounding track, and I'm gonna stick to that. And that's both in terms of the music itself, but also the lyrics. I feel like are a little less dark and horrific than the last three may have been.
Yeah, the lyrics are much lighter here, actually. I think this is one of the rays of sunshine on the album, lyrically speaking. Stuck in a daydream under a moonbeam is the opening lyrical line, and that, I think, is almost sounds like a quintessential kind of hippie thing. I think a lot of people might be tempted to be reductive about that one, but it really paints a picture like, I'm in my happy place at home, stuck in a daydream under a moonbeam, head on my pillow at home. And the next line is, drunk are the people outside my window, full of testosterone. So outside my house is chaos. Inside, I'm chill, man. And it goes on to say, when I get trouble my way, like paper mache, they stick to chimera balloon, and I kick it out my door. Another word that I had to look up dictionary-wise. I didn't know what it meant. And once I looked it up, it made sense. And it essentially just means fictitious or figment of my imagination. So chimera is basically an illusion or fabrication of the mind. So it's an imaginary balloon in this context, hence the term dream balloon. And I never really put that together until fairly recently. The dream balloon is like a metaphor for something to stick your problems to, and in this case, kick it out your door. Forget about it. This song is all about forgetting your problems, moving on, and being able to handle anything that comes your way in life with calmness.
That is exactly what I had in mind for the meaning behind this song as well. This one's a little easier to grasp than the last one. I think that concept sticks out a little more, hence the fact that we were both able to latch onto that same idea. I also was thinking that just maybe the one kind of negative to the idea of that is that maybe it could be a little bit about running away from your problems or hiding from your problems. Like instead of dealing with things head on and fixing things or working on things, you just kind of stick them on the balloon and kick them back outside. But I don't know. For the most part, I think it sounds positive, and it's like about being in your own happy little bubble where you can't be bothered, and you just push all the bad stuff away and stay in your little happy place.
And to be fair to continue on with the point that you were making there, Joe, this song has the phrase both I kick it out my door and I hide it in my drawer is another variation on that line. You get a little bit of the rhyme, of course, but to me, there's maybe a subtle little difference there between those two. The kicking it out your door, at least the way I interpret it, is, okay, it's out of my life, it's forgotten, whatever. Hiding it in my drawer, maybe that's more akin to sweeping it under the rug. That's more what you were getting at. Probably like, okay, we're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. I know it may come back to haunt me later, but for now, we're just going to stash it away.
Yeah, just gonna shove it in and slowly close the drawer. Yeah, like you said, sweeping it under the rug, or really good point there. Maybe it is a little bit of both.
My final thought on this song, Joe, is at the 2-minute 23-second mark, you get the repetition of that flute riff that began the song. You get that do 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 do. You get that reiterated at 2:23, and it's almost like a repeated comfort, like a repeated to the listener's ears, like, hey, we're in this happy space, we're okay, we're chill, and we're making this a nice place to live, so to speak, as far as like living in this track.
All right, so now that we've kicked all our problems out the door, let's dive into another door. How about a trap door, the spookiest song on the album?
I love this song, man. And another thing that I think makes this song doubly great is the transition coming out of the title track. You get just that happy flute melody repeated, as we mentioned, the 2:23 mark on Paper Mache Dream Balloon. And as that song peters out, you get this creepy, low, brooding, double bass, stretching of the bow across the strings, and it's this foreboding right before sort of the engine of the song, so to speak, revs up and gets up to the fast pace that we enjoy here on Trapdoor. It's such an abrupt transition, and it works so well because you go from this happy, relaxing place to almost a feeling of like peeking around a dark corner and you just have this foreboding feeling that something bad is waiting for you. And I think that makes Trapdoor so powerful.
Yeah, Spencer, and for that exact reason, that's why I've labeled this the spookiest track on the album. It just sounds foreboding and like you said, like danger or someone is lurking around every corner looking for you. This was also an early favorite of mine just because of how weird, but also catchy and fun it is. And I just, you can't help but love singing Trapdoor, Trapdoor over and over again. It's just too fun. And of course, they're well known for that throughout their whole discography of picking a word and saying it over and over again, especially if that word's in the title of the song. But this is a classic of that, a classic example of that, and always be one of my favorites.
Yeah, I remember the first time that I listened to this album from start to finish. I had my Bluetooth speaker on my nightstand right next to my bed, just lounging in bed in the evening. I was home alone at the time, and I remember the first 4 tracks put me in that relaxing space that we've been discussing throughout this episode so far, and my very first time hearing Trapdoor, I'm looking to my left like, what on earth is this? I like it, but what is this? What is happening in this song? And I started looking up the lyrics, and I'm like, okay, this album really does bring a little bit of everything, and I am all in.
So the lyrics to this song are so short that I could just read them all to you right now because there's just kind of one verse and then the main refrain of trapdoor, trapdoor, it's a trap over and over again. But, I mean, right here, the single verse that is repeated twice is everybody knows what's under the door and everybody goes to great lengths for sure to hide themselves away and keep the beast at bay because everybody knows trapdoor, trapdoor, the trapdoor is a trap. There you go. That's the whole song. You've experienced it. And this song is where I feel the album takes kind of a fantastical turn. I mean, the lyrics and the imagery of everybody knowing what's under a door and keeping the beast at bay, I mean, could be a reference to, you know, keeping some sort of real world problems at bay. There might be some kind of connection there, but the imagery really gives me sort of this dark, like medieval fairy tale sort of feeling, and that might be partially to blame to the music video for this song, which has all the guys in weird robes and in like kind of a spooky looking castle lit by candles and torches and these sorts of things.
Yeah, the music video, as I recall it, is a little bit Monty Python-esque, and it kind of gives off the low production value and the inherent goofiness, but it does kind of hammer home your point, Joe, about how this almost does have that fantastical feel to it. I think another meaning you might read into it, depending on your point of view here, this song might also potentially be about putting on a facade. You know, everybody knows what's under the door. People know that we aren't all being ourselves 100% all the time. Everybody goes to great lengths for sure to hide themselves away and keep the beast at bay. We don't always let our freak flag fly, so to speak, or in more negative connotations, we don't always let our most negative aspects show to the general facing public. So that's just another theory on what this might be about.
I think that's not a bad interpretation. You know, that everyone's not always their true selves on the outside, or even if they seem fine or perfect and put together on the outside, they, you know, everybody's got their own problems inside that they're dealing with, and maybe we're reading into it. I don't know, but it could just be a weird song about a scary monster under a trapdoor in a castle.
Could be. I like the idea of that as well. That's equally entertaining.
It can be both.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, this song is the only one on this album to get a music video. So previously on our last album discussion on Infest the Rat's Nest, we did a little segment at the end talking about the couple different music videos, but we could just cover this one real quick now while we're on the song before we move on. There's not too much to say. Like I said, it's the guys kind of in robes wandering around what looks like a castle with candles and stuff. Joey is like inside of a table. His face is coming out of a table with a couple of the other guys standing, sitting around it with some food and things, and this candlestick is dancing around. To be honest, I don't really know what to say about it other than it's weird, and it has this very like lo-fi, like high school or college film production, like film project kind of vibe to it. As somebody that went to film school, I'm getting that kind of vibe from it. So I don't know. It's funny, it's weird, and it definitely feels like a time capsule of the band. So I recommend you check it out if you've never seen it.
Yeah, the production values and the feel, I fully agree with you there, Joe. They really hint at that type of feel, and this is something that will, I think, will not be seen by the general public, but there exists a DVD out there somewhere of me reenacting Homer's The Odyssey in a similar sort of low-budget, backyard, handheld little camcorder fashion. So this
we got to get our hands on that.
This ties to some good memories to me, and it does offer obviously the comedic value in addition to the awesome track. So if you liked this spooky track, you might like the theme and at least the title of the very next track. This one's about a dead body, Cold Cadaver.
Heard her before, knocking at my front door. I said, what's the problem? She said, it's the cold cadaver.
This song might be the most blatant and upfront example of that dark lyric and happy sounding song juxtaposition that we've mentioned several times now. I mean, the title literally being Cold Cadaver, cadaver of course being a corpse, a dead body. And just this is a happy sounding one. The music isn't spooky like Trapdoor. It's not as weird. We're kind of back to just the upbeat kind of mid-tempo, cheery acoustic guitar, lots of flute. It's a great, catchy, gentle sounding one.
It's just so gentle and catchy and happy. And then you get the banger lines. Heard her before, knocking at my front door. I said, what's the problem? She said, it's the cold cadaver. And I'm just picturing these grinning, smiling individuals talking to one another about this cadaver. And it's just like so intentionally disingenuous and just like these fake smiles plastered onto these people that I'm imagining having this conversation. I'm almost imagining those creepy, distorted, smiling faces on the Black Hole Sun music video from Soundgarden back in the 90s. But you were right, Joe. Like, this is my big takeaway. I had the same thought that this is like the king on this album in terms of the intentional disconnect and the juxtaposition of the happy instrumental feeling and vibes against the dark as hell lyrics.
This is another track on the album, just like we said about Dirt earlier, that I have a little bit of trouble extracting a deeper meaning from other than, what's blatantly written out in the lyrics. But I do like what you've had to say about it, Spencer, just these something about there being a dead body and somebody's just like, what's the problem? What's wrong? And they're like, oh, it's that cold cadaver. It's that dead body on the floor of your house. Like, look, are we going to talk about that? I don't know. I don't really know what to pull from this other than maybe sort of connecting it to the carelessness talked about, the fecklessness being talked about in Sense earlier, and kind of something related to that. I don't know. Spencer, do you have any idea of the cold cadaver? Could it be meaning something, anything more than just a literal dead body?
It could be. I mean, it could easily be metaphorical for something. And I know that I've seen exchanges on the subreddit of people speculating what the song is actually about, and I just haven't made the space in my brain, I guess, and or you might call it not doing enough homework for the preparation on this episode, but I haven't retained any of what really came out of those discussions on the subreddit, and I'm sure you pick 5 or 6 random Gizzheads, and you might get 5 or 6 different answers on what this song could be about, and again, that's part of the beauty of this band and the way these guys write their songs. I mean, you can fairly easily interpret what some of them are about, and some are just really left to mystery.
Yeah, and I don't like to do this too often because I like to give our own sort of interpretations of the songs without, digging up other people's ideas as often. But just for right now, for this one, I'm going to pull up Genius and just take a look at what some people might have to say over there. Now, there is an annotation here that says it is unreviewed, so take this with a grain of salt. This is just one person's interpretation that I think is actually kind of interesting. So the chorus section with the lines, "This can't be over, heard her before, knocking at my front door, I said, what's the problem? She said, it's the cold cadaver." I highlighted that there. And this little note here, somebody wrote, "The relationship between these two is over. They have broken up. All that's left is the dead body of what they once had together." So this person is taking it as sort of an analogy for a relationship coming to an end, and the dead body just being the symbol of the finality of what they once had.
I do like that. Yeah. I mean, for a song that could be about any number of different things and any number of different metaphors, yeah, that one's, I think, just as feasible as the next one, potentially.
Yeah, and another thing here that might connect to that a little bit too is the second verse, the lines, "My tongue is big, but not as big as his." So maybe this was a relationship that came to an end, and this person's significant other left them for a guy with a bigger tongue, or maybe that's a euphemism for a bigger something else. And then nostrils, mouth, and ears start to disappear. There's another note here that says, like, a dead body, eventually starts to rot and facial features disappear and things. So I don't know. Those are just some ideas I'm pulling from the internet, but you make up your own mind about it. Listen to the song. Either way, it's a banger and it's super catchy. I always love this one. Anyway, with all that said, let's move on to the next track, track 7, Bida Bida Bida, The Bitter Boogie.
Shout out to Ambrose, who started singing Chicken, Chicken, Chicken to the tune of this song at the Richmond show recently, while throwing pieces of rotisserie chicken out into the crowd. I would have paid triple, quadruple, quintuple what I paid to get into the Philly show to have been able to see what happened in Richmond that night. That just sounded so...
Yeah.
And I know we listed that among our favorite tour highlights so far in our previous episode. Anyway, the Bitter Boogie, not the Chicken Boogie in all actuality, this one takes the tempo down a little bit once again after we had kind of a banger, kind of an up-tempo song in Cold Cadaver. This song, I noticed early on, despite its title, doesn't sound very bitter. This is maybe keeping in tune with the rest of the album. Once again, the dark or negative lyrics and the more upbeat, cheery-sounding instrumentation. This one doesn't sound particularly dark, but it is just about sort of being in a bitter frame of mind and having a hard time kicking it. At least that's my very surface level interpretation of it as we come off the top of this song discussion here. The bitter boogie comes without warning. When it's inside of me, it is exhausting. I don't like the way it makes me freeze up, and all it makes me say, I know it comes off bitter. And yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, this one, which, thank goodness, after such a challenging exercise trying to dissect the previous song, this is, I think, just point blank about when you're bitter, when you're upset, when you're frustrated or angry about a certain situation, it just gets so pent up inside of you, it channels every ounce of energy you have, basically, and it can be hard to get over.
Totally. I completely agree with that. And it could also be, the bitter boogie could be a word for describing, like, not just anger or sadness, but maybe like anxiety as well, having this bitter feeling welling up inside of you that makes you freeze up and makes it hard to just do normal tasks or get through the day and be cheery when you got this rough stuff going on inside of you. I think it's very relatable when you think of it that way.
Yeah, and we should also note that to this point on the album, all of the vocals, at least all the lead vocals, have been sung by Stu. But on the back half of this one, we finally get an Ambrose vocal. He comes in with that very that trademark register of his. From the first glance, had no chance. From the first glance, had no chance. Make an exception. At least that's the closest I can get to my Ambrose vocal impression. Make an exception.
I always love singing this part along. I love the Ambrose verse on this. I mean, I've talked about a lot. I feel like how much of an Ambrose stan I am, if you will. But this is one of like the first times where I heard like a big highlight of him on one of their albums as I was just getting into the band, and this part has always stood out to me, and I've always loved it.
Me too, yeah. And I remember you telling me actually when I was early on in my Giz fandom that was Ambrose singing that part, and so that I latched onto that vocal as, okay, this is an example of what he sounds like, as I started to then differentiate on other songs from other albums whose voice was whose. And so yeah, I like the change in feel that it provides, and sort of the overlapping vocals, the vocal tracks that overlap in this section of the song. He's singing his part, and then the bitter, bitter, bitter continues. And I like the way those overlap and kind of play almost in harmony with one another as the song continues.
One thing I wanted to point out that I made a realization of just yesterday listening to the album again is that the beginning of this song, not necessarily the sound of it and the instrumentation, but the overall kind of groove and rhythm of it gives me almost like a ZZ Top vibe where I just want to go, how, like right to the beginning as the song is kicking in.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I know where you're coming from there, Joe. And yeah, and I like the piano at the beginning of the song. It sounds intentionally sort of out of tune or detuned, and it gives it like a really unique feel and sound to it. Again, though, there's just this contradiction with the title. Even though we said ZZ Top and kind of blues rock influence, when I think of the word boogie, this is like significantly down tempo from what I expect of sort of a boogie track. And, we think Plastic Boogie or Boogeyman Sam. And I don't know how far off the mark I am, if anything, here, but I think it's ironic that both the words bitter and boogie maybe are possibly intentionally misleading about the content of this song. That being said, though, I love this song. I really do.
Yeah, I think you're right about the whole tempo and general energy of it not necessarily feeling like a boogie, but I do like the irony of the title with bitter and boogie right next to each other. You get that the ironic alliteration happening there. I really do love. So you mentioned that detuned piano sound early on that starts off the song. Speaking of detuning, I want to point out one cool kind of sound that happens after each chorus, where you can hear the sound of a guitar just going like down, 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 down. And I think what it is one of the guys is just hitting one of the guitar strings over and over again and literally turning the tuning head down and detuning it. And it kind of adds this cool kind of texture and sound. And that just always stood out to me. And I just like weird kind of little things added in there like that.
One final thought that I have on this song, there's almost a false ending right before the Ambrose vocal section of the song, and right when the instruments drop out for just a brief second or two, you get the harmonica coming in by itself, and just that lone harmonica played in the way that Ambrose plays it, you get almost this mind picture of you're out in the placid countryside, and then all of a sudden the camera pans over to Ambrose wearing a cowboy hat and chewing on a stalk of wheat or barley or something, just like a farmer would. And that's just the image that pops into my mind there, just like you're looking across the sweeping Australian countryside. I could easily picture Ambrose, though, as the Thing in such attire because of the when he was crowd surfing singing Billabong Valley earlier on this tour. So I think that image has just planted itself in my brain so firmly.
Yeah.
And it, in hindsight, or rather in retrospect, it goes back and makes me enjoy and appreciate certain small details of songs like The Bitter Boogie further back in the discography.
For sure. We love Cowboy Ambrose. One other interesting thing about this song before we move on to the next track is that this is actually the longest song on the album, coming in at just under 4.5 minutes, which is not long and is kind of weird for King Giz. I mean, even up to this point, their first few albums, they had released, I think Quarters was the last record right before this one, and that was, of course, 4 10-minute long songs. So coming off the back of that, this is kind of unique in that way that all these tracks are really quite short. But yeah, this is the longest one, and obviously we had a lot to say about it. So for the sake of keeping things moving, why don't we jump on ahead to the next track, and another early favorite of mine off this album. It's NGRI Bloodstain.
Sorry.
So NGRI, after we finally took the time to look up the definition, this comes straight from a government site, by the way. NGRI stands for Not Guilty by Reason of Insanity, and it's a plea by a criminal defendant who admits the criminal act, but claims that they were mentally disturbed at the time of the crime and lacked the mental capacity to have intended to commit a crime. This one, I think, really fits the mold of sort of a Cold Cadaver type of situation where it's just the most upbeat and sunny and fun-sounding instrumentation, but, bloodstain. What? Somebody died? Huh? And just some of the lines throughout the song, I think it's not, I don't think it's necessarily about like an actual plea by a criminal, but again, it's something that hints at something a little deeper. I know that was very specific, Joe. Something that hits at something deeper, right?
Yeah. I wondered for the longest time what NGRI was supposed to stand for, because there's nowhere in the lyrics that, says the full words out loud of what it stands for. And I think that's appropriate because this song is full of dark lyrics about being covered in blood and suffering endlessly, summoning demons. It's a wild ride. And you know what? I think I have to take something back that we said earlier about Cold Cadaver. We said that was like the most upbeat, happy sounding song with dark lyrics. It was the heaviest contrast between the lyrics and the music. But I think I spoke too soon, because I think this one right here takes the cake. It is like the fastest song on the album, super fast, super upbeat, and fun and goofy sounding. It's really a good time. And like I mentioned, going right into the song and introducing it here, I mentioned this was an early favorite of mine. This for sure was the first song that stood out to me on this album that I had stuck in my head, and really the first one that I fell in love with.
Yeah, this one's easy to tap your foot, or in my case, usually tap your finger to. And you probably remember this, Joe, from when we were working together. Anytime this song would come on, I would be tapping my index finger in the same space on the work surface in front of me, imitating the single repetitive piano note that's being played, whether it's Stu or Lucas, because Lucas does also play some piano on this album. I don't know which of the band members it is playing the piano here, but that single repeated note on the piano just being struck over and over and over again at fast pace, it, first of all, reminds me of Jerry Lee Lewis' Great Balls of Fire,
right?
Very much. And then also it really, this song contains so much more boogie than the Bitter Boogie, ironically enough. And that can't be an accident. I'm sure that's the guys having fun and saying, "Oh, let's make the song with boogie in it, not that boogie-ish, and make the next one so much boogie," But I'm with you in terms of it being a kind of an early favorite of mine, and upbeat and fun. If I may offer my theory on what the lyrics may be about, rather than just being about a murderer who is not right in the head, I think this could be about someone who is not mentally well and keeps committing acts, whether they're crimes or not. Maybe they're just things that he's not proud of in interactions with other people. Maybe this person is just doing things they're not proud of but doesn't realize it until it's too late. Hence the blood stain and the saying sorry, just like, shoot, I'm not fully aware in the moment that I'm doing all these things. I'm sorry, but I realized all the destruction it's causing and the harm that it's causing.
You might be onto something there, although I think it's a lot more fun to think of it about a guy literally just going absolutely insane, murdering people, being covered in blood, and then being like, sorry, I'm insane.
It could just as easily. Yeah.
It could be a little bit of both, but either way, it's forever going to be one of my favorites off this album. It's so fun. It's so catchy to just sing along with. I mean, it never gets old. It's, in my opinion, the catchiest and just goofiest off the album. I've been putting some little tags on some of these songs, like, for example, calling the title track the happiest sounding song, Trapdoors the spookiest. This one, I wrote that this is the funniest song and the goofiest, just because of the chaotic contrast of the lyrics talking about, murder and being covered in blood and all this, but it is the most upbeat and fun track on the whole album.
Yeah, the sing-along value is high on this one, and just the sheer energy and the goofiness, as you mentioned, Joe. Yeah, that's all present, and this is definitely a standout track. I also, one other little instrumental note for me here at the end of this track, in fact, you notice the noodling on the sitar there, right as the track comes to a close before transitions to the next?
Oh, yeah. I never really thought about it too much, but I love that little sitar noodling at the end.
I'm having a hard time thinking of the sitar appearing anywhere else on this album, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it does. And if I am indeed right in that, it's a shame, because I think that is one other instrument this album could have used a little bit more of. I'm not saying the album, that's a shortcoming of the album by any means. I just think it's an instrument that could have found a rightful home on a couple of tracks on this album, for sure. Yeah,
definitely. I love the sitar being blended in with a whole different variety of instruments, and in kind of a setting like this, I think it could have fit right in with having more of it.
Totally. Well, in the interest of time, let's go to a song that concerns itself, in a way, with time. This is Time Equals Fate.
It's always in between the lines you thought you read. The time and distance keyhole needle through the thread. I can't help but be sad sometimes.
Time Equals Fate is a special track because we get a special vocalist on this one after most of them being led by Stu, with the exception of Ambrose's verse on Bitter Boogie. But Time Equals Fate, we get special vocals from Cookie, which we always love a nice Cookie song here and there. Not pretty rare in most of their discography until recently with all the stuff he is involved in on B741 as far as vocals go. But this track stands out for that reason, and I've always loved it. It's always a pleasant surprise to hear his voice, and I just love the uniqueness of it and what it adds to this track here.
Yeah, and I know that over time, once you got me into the band, that we've always loved singing that opening line. It's always in between the lines you thought you read.
Whoa, is that Cook Craig on the podcast with me right now? Hey, buddy, I'm a huge fan.
Hey, thanks for following us.
What the fuck?
What is happening to us?
Before diving into the lyrics too much here, I guess all I could really say about the instrumentation is I feel like there's nothing too particular about the music of this song that stands out from the others. It's kind of got the same sort of vibe going on, with the acoustic guitar and flute really leading the whole thing. Sort of mid-tempo, not too fast, but not a real slow one either. It's just unique and stands out because of having Cookie on it, really, is what makes it special. And I think it's a fun and catchy one, like all the other songs are as well. So jumping into the lyrics here a little bit, really the main takeaway that I sort of read into with this track is I get the idea that it's about not focusing too much on the past, both good and bad things from the past. Because if you think about great things like that great party where we had a blast, as he mentions, it could leave you wanting to recreate things that have already happened and wanting those same things over and over again that you can't always recreate. You always got to look forward to the next thing in the future. You can't always just have that one special thing from the past because it's over, but you could still just appreciate the memory of it, and also not focusing too much on negative things from the past and letting that bring you down. You got to keep moving on. Time's going to keep moving either way, so you got to move along with it and make the best of everything.
I know this isn't the most of what we like segment of the show, but recently my fiance Amanda and I went to see Inside Out 2 at the theater, and there's this semi-recurring character called Nostalgia that only comes out a few times during the movie. It's portrayed as this older female figure inside the brain who comes out this back door just to chime in with, hey, I remember when this was good, or when this good memory happened, to the main character. Sort of like the member berries in South Park. just all about the nostalgia and things that happened in the past. And the characters in the case of Inside Out 2 just have to basically be like, okay, that's nice. Go back to your hole now. And I think that something like that, like little bits of reminders like that in various media, like this song, tying it back to the song Time Equals Fate, serve as good reminders not to live in the past too much. It's okay to savor a memory, but you don't want to get too tied to the past, because like Cookie sings in the song, look ahead, you'll not waste your time mends furrowed brows. I can't help but thinking now, back here I'll wait, please don't let the past be my fate. Don't live in the past too much, it's gonna hurt you.
Time equals fate, but guys, time also equals money? Let's listen to the next song, Time Equals Money. So track 10, Time Equals Money. It's actually coming in at the shortest song on the album at just over 2 minutes. I'm seeing 2 minutes and 4 seconds according to Spotify here. Also another moment on the album that's not super stand out to me. I feel like it fits the same sort of vibe as the last track and a lot of these songs in general. Another one that's not too fast or not too slow. So it's similar to the previous track in that way. We're back to having Stu on the lead vocals here. And Spencer, what do you think about this one? What's this song about?
Time has inherent value, and this is another kind of tricky one to sort of wrap my brain around, but I have an inkling as to what it might be trying to say. I think one way you can interpret this second sort of chunk of lyrics. I know when my gums start bleeding and pissing over my teeth, there's a word picture for you, that I'm low on my buck without any luck, and all I gotta say, why is time my money? Because it sounds funny to give me so much time and no money nearby. That latter part calls back to the very first few lines of the song. I don't know if this is the intent behind this song, but this almost like evokes poorer person or a person with fewer material means to take care of themselves. I know when my gums start bleeding and pissing over my teeth that I'm low on my buck, and then getting onto the why is time my money? You know, these people who use all of their time to try and gain what little money they can gain. It just creates this destructive loop where they don't always have time to fully take care of themselves. And again, like I gave the qualifier there, I have no idea if that's anywhere close to what this song is supposed to be about, but that's something that registered for me at least.
No, I think you're actually onto something there. You know, that this person is saying, you know, why is time my money? They'd actually be better off if they just had money for money instead of time for money, right? Because they're spending all their time trying to take care of themselves and keep things together, but they're struggling. So if they just had money instead, they'd be able to maybe take better care of themselves and get what they need to be happy and be able to live a fulfilled life. Definitely.
One instrumental observation that I have on the song, the very beginning where Stu comes in with the flute, he's hitting some minor notes there, and I think this has to be intentional. The minor key at the beginning with those flute notes, I think it alludes to the discomfort and the worry and the anxiety that the topic of money brings many people. Because if you notice the way the song moves on from that very opening part with the flute, the minor key doesn't really hang around, does it?
No, I think this song is one of those ones that for the most part just sounds happy and upbeat again, like most of them. But yeah, you're right in pointing out that little kind of few minor notes and things that come in here and there in the flute, I think is just kind of hinting at sort of the dark, not so great nature of what's behind the song. But yeah, for the most part, it keeps that sort of upbeat nature of the whole album. So speaking of time being money, let's move on. We're almost at the end of our track list here. Let's go ahead on to and I'm going to use the word, the penultimate track of this album, Most of What I Like.
Most of what I like is given to me by the one that I love.
Most of What I Like. This is the part of the show where... Oh, wait. This is the actual song, not the segment. Shoot. I'm sorry, Joe.
Yeah, it's a song, man. Yeah, but that sounds familiar, doesn't it? I think people who've listened to a couple episodes of this show, even if for some weird reason they never heard this album, would sound familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Most of What I Like, the song, track number 10 on this 11-track album. I took some notes on this one, and this one didn't take as much mental gymnastics as some of the others did to sort of figure out the message behind it, the potential message at least. I get vibes of the character, quote unquote, in this song having some imposter syndrome, perhaps. This person maybe is not feeling good enough about themselves, feeling that they're not good enough for their significant other or this person that they love, because right from the beginning says, most of what I like is given to me by the one that I love, bears the onus every time. Technically, I don't deserve to live this kind of life, perturbed at what I might become. And it goes on and on. I'm bleeding from the eyes, you always shut your eyes when you look me in the eyes, always caressing the ropes which I've frayed, the corpse that I'm dressing should never be displayed. I feel like it's fairly clear to me this person feels like they're no good, they don't bring much value to this relationship, this interpersonal situation, and this other person in the picture they feel is constantly left to pick up the pieces and provide all the comfort.
Kind of an interesting demonstration of self-awareness, maybe, that this person knows that, you know, their significant other or whoever this is talking about is too good for them or take such good care of them, and they can never live up to that standard and be good enough in return. And, you know, maybe they don't deserve all the good things and the care they get from this person, maybe.
Yeah, and as the track rolls to the end, the phrase should never be displayed by my count, is repeated at least a dozen times. And I don't know if that necessarily serves much of a purpose, but you do hear the instruments kind of noodling and prolonging the song. I like how it almost feels like the instruments are ad-libbing a little bit, while Stu is just sort of singing over and over, should never be displayed, almost like okay guys, finish up what you're trying to do on the instruments, because I don't want to have to sing this phrase too many more times. But it's almost, you sense that the album is coming to an end and they want to stretch that last full track proper, at least the last track with lyrics on it, stretch it into a more length. We get 3:17 in the end of this one.
I think you've made some good points there, and I honestly don't have too much else to say about this one. I think we hit the spots that we needed to hit on, and just in general, I just want to say that I love this song. I think it's really sweet sounding, even if the lyrics are kind of sad, at least the way we're interpreting them. But it's a really nice sounding song and a really nice way to carry us out towards the end of the album. This is, like you mentioned, the final track with lyrics on it. So in a way, it kind of really is the final song before we get to track 12, which is just an instrumental medley of all of the little bits and pieces and main motifs of each song. So let's take a little listen to that. The final track. Track 12 on the album, simply titled Paper Mache.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I love the way this track puts a nice little bow on the album. As you said, it's a medley, a recap almost, of little segments of each of the preceding songs on the album, and they're interpreted in very slightly different ways on the flute here, on this closing track, but you can really easily tell still which track is which as Stu plays through this medley on the flute, and I believe there is sort of a little bit of light percussion from Cavs backing this one up, but really a fantastic way to end the album, and I just love the way that it takes you back through the journey.
Yeah, the instrumentation on this track is really simple. It's just acoustic guitar, a little bit of light percussion, bass, and the flute playing the main melody for a few seconds from each of the songs back to back in a full medley that goes on for 2.5 minutes. It's a really cool, fun, pretty way to just recap all the songs, revisit a little piece of each of them, and take us right on out to the end of the record.
The final sound that you hear is just that drawing out of the final note of most of what I like. And then that's the end of the album. Oh, wait. There are these horrible noises. What's happening? What's happening? The tape machine's broken. Yeah, you get these insane, like, high-pitched squealing noises, and it really does sound like a tape machine malfunctioning, or I don't know if it's an actual organic sound they recorded in the studio somewhere, or...
I think it's the entire album being played really fast in reverse.
Okay, yeah.
That's what it kind of sounds like.
Yeah.
I think it's the entire thing speeding up in reverse to where you could barely even make out any individual piece of it, but that's what I think is going on.
And then you get the explosion at the very end, which... for an album so full of contradictions, that's like the pinnacle. That's like the ultimate contradiction. You have this album so full of chill and relaxing vibes and soothing acoustic instrumentation, and then these ridiculous sounds blast you at the end, and then kaboom, it all blows up.
This violent, chaotic, high-pitched, ear-piercing reversal of all the songs right after the most beautiful, gentle flute medley, and then the explosion is just, it's just the cherry on top, and it just cracks me up every time I listen to it. I always have to hear it right up to the end and listen to this part of it.
I actually remember my parents were in town visiting not long ago, and I put a playlist on shuffle that had some Giz in it, but it turns out this track was included, and so I let my family enjoy this nice flute-powered chill acoustic track, and before all that noise and chaos hit, I sort of subtly hit the skip button on my steering wheel and basically just pretended, okay, yep, that's how that song ends. That's 100% how that ends. I don't need to hassle them with the horrors.
You don't want to scare them, or at the very least confuse the hell out of everybody in the room.
Exactly. Okay, so now that we've gone through our track by track, it's time to choose our respective top 3 favorites and our least favorite. Joe, what do you got?
Oh God, I really meant to write these down this time ahead of time so I could just read them off a list and give them right to you. But no, I'm going to do what I did back the last 2 times, which is not write them down ahead of time, but just kind of pick them off the top of my brain here. Okay, in order of how they appear on the album, I'm first going to go with the opening track since it is just too good and clean and fresh and inviting of an opening song. Next, I'm going to go with The Bitter Boogie because it is long and jammy and it has Ambrose on it and I love his section. And finally, I think I'm going to have to pick NGRI Bloodstain just because that was the first song off this album that really stuck with me. It's fun and weird and goofy and dark at the same time, and it just never gets old for me. So what about you, Spencer?
My 3 favorites are, in order as they appear on the album, Sense, Paper Mache Dream Balloon, and Trapdoor. I'm actually surprised at the lack of overlap on our top 3.
Yeah, it was hard not to go with Trapdoor because that's one that I definitely listen to all the time, and if it ever comes on like a playlist or a random mix or anything, I always leave it on, and it might even be the song I've listened to the most off this album, but I don't know. I had to go with Bloodstain just because of the special place it has and my memory of first hearing it for the first time when I listened to this album.
Fair choice. How about your least favorite?
So only one overlap with the favorites, but I'm curious if we line up here on the least favorite. For me, I have to go with Time Equals Money. It is the shortest song on the album, and to me, just the least unique and least interesting. Time Equals Fate was a close contender, but I really love Cookie's voice on that, and I find that song to be a little bit more catchy and just feel like it's a little cooler, more interesting. So yeah, Time Equals Money for me is the least favorite.
Okay, we not only chose the same track, but we also had similar thought process to get there. The Cookie vocals definitely put Time Equals Fate over the top of that one for me.
Yep.
So yeah, Time Equals Money, not a track we necessarily dislike all that much, but it is our least favorite on the album.
As we've said before, it's always hard to pick a least favorite because most of these albums we love all the way through, but glad we lined up on something there.
Okay, now it's time to jump into our final segment on the show, Most of What We Like.
Most of what we like.
All right, as you're likely familiar with, if you've been listening through our young history of the show to this point, you know this is the segment of the show where we highlight any non-Gizzard music or movies or really any form of media that we're into lately. Joe, what are you into lately?
So this week, I don't know if it's just because of the hype of the shows that we talked about last time or what, but I've been listening to mostly King Gizzard nonstop since then. I'm still trying to find some new things to listen to, so if anybody out there wants to recommend some Giz adjacent or really any kind of music that you love that you think we might dig as well, send some suggestions because I'm dying for a break. I need more music to listen to. So this week, I want to give a shout out to 2 other music-themed podcasts that I've really been enjoying for a while now, actually. The first one is Dissect, which is a podcast ran and hosted by this guy, Cole Kushner, who has a background in music theory and classical music and all this sort of stuff. And basically, he does seasons where he'll do an episode that's an hour or more on each song, really deeply dissecting the production, any samples that are used, the instrumentation, and the lyrics, the lyrical analysis. He gets super deep with all of it and kind of jumps around and does a bunch of different genres as well. He's done a lot of rap albums, some stuff by Kanye West and Kendrick Lamar, as well as a couple Radiohead albums, so he's kind of all over the place. The last one he did was actually on Mad Villainy by MF Doom, so really big fan of that album. So check that out if you're into more musical analysis type of stuff and see if he's covered an album that you're a fan of. And another quick one I want to give a shout out to, another music-themed podcast, is one that you got me into, actually, Spencer, called Disgraceland, hosted by Jake Brennan, and it's really, like, genius. Every episode is like a mini true crime story almost, but all related to and connected to famous musicians, and recently he's actually branched out a bit to talking about celebrities outside of just the world of music, some crazy stories and crimes and all sorts of horrible things related to different celebrities, actors, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm really glad I was able to get you into Disgraceland. I listen to that one week after week. He puts out a couple of items each week. It's really a good time. And you, in turn, got me into Dissect, actually, and I really enjoyed that season on Radiohead's In Rainbows album analysis. So big thanks to you for that, my man. As for what I'm into lately, the British band Glass Animals I've gotten into over the past month or so, and I have my brother Evan to thank for this. When we arrived in Seattle for my bachelor weekend, it was just the two of us for a couple of hours before the other guys started arriving. So we had a couple hours to ourselves just to kind of catch up and have our brother time, and we kind of shared some music with each other, and he shared some Glass Animals songs with me. I've delved into their catalog a little bit, but most specifically the album How to Be a Human Being, which came out in 2016. Kind of some indie pop, alternative pop and rock content. They're a pretty interesting band. They have a good handful of albums out at this stage, but this was the album in particular, How to Be a Human Being, that we listened to for the most part while we were just having that chill time together, so I will forever have those nice memories associated with that. I also have been over time watching the Netflix documentary Fear City. It's all about the New York City Police Department's efforts to curb the mob in New York during the 1970s. And I've always been fascinated with 70s pop culture and aesthetics. Everything just from my perspective, me born in 1992, everything in the 70s, just movies and TV and film, photos, everything just looks so gritty and dirty and creepy and weird and just so unique in that way. So I got drawn to this pretty easily, and it's really fascinating how the police department goes about their methods of rounding up all these high-level criminals who are just causing havoc in the city at the time. Really interesting and definitely worth a watch.
Awesome. I might need to keep my eyes out for that next time I'm looking for a new show to watch. And yeah, Glass Animals I've listened to a little bit of before, but maybe this is my sign to check out more of their stuff as well. So thank you for the recommendations.
Okay, so that wraps up this episode of Podagon Infinity. We're glad you could join us. If you're not already, be sure to follow us on all the major socials at Podagon Infinity. Instagram, Facebook, X. We're also on YouTube. We have all of our episodes up there on YouTube. And you can also email us, as always, podagoninfinity@gmail.com. Well, Joe, we had a pretty brief discussion earlier in the week about which album we should do next. Do you want to give the big reveal now?
Sure thing. We are going to be jumping ahead a few years in the future from Paper Mache and switching up the vibe a bit with Butterfly 3000, another longtime favorite of mine ever since it came out, and that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So if you're a fan of that album, please stay tuned and don't miss it. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be so much fun, and we hope you can join us for that. Until then, I'm Spencer.
And I am Joe.
Later, Gators.
Woo! Oh, my dog's screaming at nothing. Hey!